This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
Coming up on this week's programme, an open discussion next week will look at how the police handle both violent and peaceful protesters.
When you ask for justice, when you ask for rights to be protected, the police seem to go after the individuals who are demanding justice. This is a gross violation of fundamental rights.
And over 40 tonnes of rubbish was collected from the streets of Limassol after carnival last year. If you're going along to the celebrations this year, what will you do to try and make sure that number doesn't go up?
If you go on the carnival, collect your rubbish, or if you find rubbish on the streets as well, collect them, so that we ensure it's like a more cleaner space.
On Monday, there's a public debate on the growing repression and shrinking right to protest. Now, it's something that's been in the news since a demonstration on January the 19th at which several peaceful demonstrators were arrested. One of the panellists at Monday's event is my guest on this week's programme. He is Professor of Sociology and Law at the University of Nicosia, Nikos Trimikliniodis. Nikos, I think a lot of people are aware of what's going on, but I wonder how many of them are as bothered about it as I guess you are, and certainly I am.
Yes, well, I think it's bothering a lot more people than what we think. It's just that the picture that is presented in the media doesn't really depict how concerned people are as they see this situation essentially shrinking the space, the public space for people's rights to express their views, to protest, and to act in a way that allows them to say what is happening in society today. Because we're living in a society in crisis, not just in Cyprus, of course, globally, but we're seeing many crises, many problems, many issues relating to violence, police violence in particular, and police action which does not comply with fundamental rights.
Fundamental rights that in most areas of the world are enshrined in law, are they not?
Yeah, of course, all democratic regimes, international instruments protect the right to demonstrate, the right to freedom of assembly, and it's considered to be a fundamental right. So this is one of the issues that we're discussing a lot lately, because we're seeing these rights being violated regularly. And in fact, there is an attempt in changing the law in Cyprus in particular to restrict the right to freedom of assembly.
And what exactly is that law that I think is currently before the committee in Parliament saying? How is it going to infringe, if you like, on the public's right to assembly and freedom of speech even?
Well, this law has been there for some time now. It was put to a kind of a consultation process, and we were waiting for this to come back at some point. We didn't hear much about it, but lately it seems that they would be pushing it through. I don't know exactly when and how they will do so, but it's now being debated again. And I think it's very important to speak to the relevant committee at some point to see whether this is going through, because it's a very dangerous development, because we're seeing it has a number of issues which are of public concern. We're talking about a situation where public assemblies are, regarding marches in Cyprus, will be revised considerably in a way that restricts the right to freedom of assembly. And this is in contravention of the Commissioners for Legislation, who herself issued a very important commentary, which was very clearly that this is not in line with the Venice Principle, the UN Human Rights Committee's recommendations, and the European Convention of Human Rights. If I was going to say, the key points, for instance, there is now before Parliament a proposal that says that organizers of gatherings must notify the competent authorities at least 7 days before the event. Now, this is we consider this to be excessive and unconstitutional because the notification procedures, if we look at, for instance, the Venice Principles, who set out the principles of these situations, it requires that these should be transparent, non-bureaucratic, and cost-free, and the requirements should be proportionate to the impact of the event. Now, the requirement of 7 days is not cost-effective and may constitute a serious obstacle to the exercise of right to freedom of assembly.
Sorry, hang on a minute, Nikos. So we're saying basically that if I want to organise a demonstration about anything, I need to inform the police a week beforehand. I can't see how that would cost me anything. Surely it's a simple email or phone call to say I'm planning this. Or have they got the right to say you cannot do that?
Well, that's the issue. The issue is that, what is possible, what is likely to happen is that the police might say, well, you didn't inform us in time, or if something happens within 3 days and you want to demonstrate, well, you didn't give us enough notice, we need 7 days notice, and then they could go after, people that they organize something illegally. That's why it's very problematic to do so. It's the idea that you could send an email, say, I will have a demonstration if you just notify them that there might be disruptive movements and the streets and all of that, and the police can organize. But surely they're already a week before that. So they say we have to not be notified 7 days before is an effort to restrict the right to freedom of assembly. Non-democratic countries, like in Turkey, for instance, you have to inform them before. Is that the direction we want to go?
So at the moment, you don't have to inform them?
You do have to. There is a practice of informing the police. You get in touch with the police, say we'll have a demonstration. It might disrupt the traffic between this time and that time. If it's in the streets and all of that. If you want to, you just notify them. It's just a notification. It's not prior. You don't require prior permit to organize a demonstration.
So it's a courtesy, really.
Well, look, you inform the police so that if there's any trouble, if there's a counter event or whatever, you just inform them so that they know, so that they don't say that you have created a public order offense. But it's really, the idea is to have minimum intervention in people's right to protest, and because it's intimately connected with freedom of expression. So even if it's, and what about issues like spontaneous assemblies? The bill provides that a gathering considered to be spontaneous only if prior consultation or invitation is given. So the definition is very problematic because if you look at what international standards say, is that the only condition for a gathering to be classified as spontaneous is that it would be impractical. So, therefore, the police does not explicitly seem to recognize that there could be a right to demonstrate, for instance, a counter demonstration to be organized. But this is enshrined in international law. It's enshrined in the International Covenant for Civil Rights, Article 21. Talks about that.
So we won't have any more flash mobs, for example. This seems a bit silly. Let me ask you about what the EU says about this, because we've seen several members of the European Union becoming very repressive. Do they have a different way of approaching this, or does the EU itself have guidance on this?
Look, it seems that the right of protest in many European countries in the EU, there are different countries. There's a recent report by the Amnesty International on the right to freedom of assembly, which provide the situation pertaining to the right to freedom of assembly in 21 countries. And the report demonstrates that there are important violations taking place in these countries in different ways. Whereas, while it is recognized that, freedom of assembly is a very important instrument for pushing for people's rights and justice, there are situations where there's often use of excessive violence, or police are intervening to stop demonstrations, these kind of things, which are undermining its rights, and this is happening in different countries.
Well, it's happening here as well, Nikos, isn't it? Because let's talk a little bit, if we may, about those arrests on January the 19th. Now, that was a demonstration against state violence against immigrants. And I gather that several of the demonstrators who were they sitting down in protest, were arrested. What for?
Well, that's the other big thing. On that day, there was a demonstration about the police being violent and murdering. There's a murder, a very mysterious murder of a migrant who was found with a bullet by a gun of a police officer. And there was a demonstration of what is going on here. It's a very, very legitimate act of demonstrating. And the people were, demonstrating. It was a peaceful assembly. There was no violence, and people were arrested. First of all, they arrested two people, saying that they shouted offensive slogans to the police.
Is that an offence that they can be arrested for?
Well, their offence that they were charged with was, first of all, that there was an insult against officers because there was a slogan the police did not like. It's a well-known slogan, shouted for many years now. It's an old slogan called the police "Batsi urunya dolofoni," which means it's pigs, police pigs, whatever, were your murderers and all of that. It's an old slogan that is shouted thousands of times before in many demonstrations, and all of a sudden they decided that this is insulting and offensive to officers. Now, to have an insult, it has to be directed against an individual person. So if I insult you and I shout abuse at you as Rosie, and I say this to you, it's directed to you. This is now a very strange extension of this, because it's saying that by shouting this slogan, you are actually insulting the individuals who are part of the police body, and it really doesn't make sense. It should be laughed out of court. There was also an arrest of another person who was filming the police when they were kind of using excessive force. And then they arrested this man. He was a retired person who was arrested, and they said, look, this is a violation of the right to privacy. And again, another violation of international practice and good standards, because we're dealing with somebody, a citizen, who's actually filming an action of a police in public for the possible protection of abuse by the police. Again, there are court decisions which clearly say that this is not an offence, and that it is indeed legitimate and acceptable, and it must be protected as a right. In fact, we have a situation where the European Court of Justice decided in the case in Latvia, this person was actually filming, video recording somebody during his arrest in the police station, the police place where he was actually being questioned, and he then published it in the YouTube channel. When the Latvian authorities had to take him to court for violation of privacy and all this, the Court of Justice decided that this is a violation of his right to protect himself, and indeed this should be protected. So all of these things that we're witnessing are undermining fundamental rights, and I think this is very important to go to the public domain to discuss these issues. And now we have also another person who just read a speech at the demonstration. He's charged with numerous offences. Afterwards, they go and they pick on this person who read a speech, and it was an acceptable speech demanding justice for the fact that this poor man was murdered in the buffer zone by when a police bullet was, and he demanded justice, and because it's a very strange situation. This body was found elsewhere. And when you ask for justice, when you ask for rights to be protected, the police seem to go after the individuals who are demanding justice. This is a gross violation of fundamental rights. It's a process of de-democratization. and really we have to be defended. It will affect everybody.
Well, it does affect everybody already, because I think a lot of people are becoming frightened of the police. Is that the bottom line here, that in actual fact the authorities at the moment want citizens to be very wary, and yet most, I would say, good policing happens with the trust and collaboration of citizens?
Absolutely, absolutely. The problem is that we have a situation now where or there is a rising concern about violence around us and a lot of things that are not acceptable. But people do not trust the police. The police, by taking this approach against peaceful marches and peaceful demonstrations, is really countering any possibility of trust and understanding and collaboration with the authorities. The police is supposed to protect people, not to violate people's rights. And I think this is the bottom line. Now, there is concern about the use of the violence in football matches, and hooliganism, and that sort of thing, which is another story that we have to talk about in another situation. But to treat people who are demonstrating and demanding justice as if they are rioting, it is really, really absurd, and it's a very, very dangerous precedent. We are really moving away from what we are used to, which is we should be living in a democracy, and the rule of law should apply.
Yeah, and the other thing, of course, you mentioned football hooliganism. An awful lot of times we've seen cases where the police actually stand back because they don't want to get involved. So it seems that there's one rule for one lot of people and a totally different one for others.
Well, that's the other thing. The police are saying, look, we don't want to get involved in that. I mean, there are issues to do with violence in football matches, but again, a lot of these problems derive from a very, very problematic approach to the way policing happens, and they do not address the fundamental causes of violence. The game is kind of lost in many ways beforehand because of the way they're behaving. But to take it out on people who are just demonstrating, who are exercising their fundamental rights, is really, really unacceptable. So you're right, it's double standards. It's a situation where they are treating individuals who are and groups who are basically expressing what democracy should be about, which is about protecting people's rights.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that it seems to me that the people who come off worst from any police activities tend to be, and I've been on some of the demonstrations where people are walking their dogs, they've got their babies in their prams. It's very clear they're not intent on any form of violence, they're just raising their voices in protest. And they get treated very differently from, let's say, some of the groups, particularly in Limassol, who wear masks, carry sticks, and so on, and the police don't seem to want to engage with them at all.
Absolutely, absolutely. This is why it's totally unacceptable. Instead of there are people who are violent, and such groups are organized, neo-Nazi groups, far right groups, who are causing all sorts of. They are spreading hatred, and they are treating others in a way which is unacceptable. The police do nothing about. I mean, how many times have we seen people, these sort of people who do commit different crimes, being arrested and prosecuted, and now they're prosecuting people who are demonstrating using their right to peaceful assembly. It's these double standards and violations of rule of law that make people very concerned.
Well, it'll be very interesting to see if the police are even bothered enough to send somebody to your debate on Monday and perhaps suggest why they do this, or suggest that they don't do it. You've got a big panel there, including, I think, an associate professor of international law and human rights from the University of Cyprus. You'll also be speaking, and I think one of the people who was arrested. It will be very interesting to see what comes out of that, and indeed how many ordinary people, not connected with any of the organisers, turn up to show that they too are beginning to get a little bit anxious about the way things are going, not just in Cyprus, but particularly all over Europe and elsewhere.
Yes, absolutely. Let's hope that this is going to be the beginning of an awareness, and people taking action to say, look, this enough is enough, and we want to protect our basic rights and democracy in this country and the world at large.
Indeed. Nikos Trimikliniodis, Professor of Sociology and Law at the University of Nicosia, one of the panellists at that event. It's happening, as we said at the beginning, at 6:30 on Monday, the 24th of February, at the Journalists' House in Nicosia, and that, appropriately, is pretty well opposite the police headquarters. Nikos, many thanks for your time.
Thank you.
This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
Now, I know people in Cyprus get very excited at carnival time, celebrations all over the island, and especially in Limassol, which seems to be the centre of carnival festivities. But how many people count the environmental cost of this? We're joined on this week's programme by Olivia Skordi, who is one of the core members of Zero Waste Alliance in Cyprus. Olivia, I was absolutely horrified to hear that I think last year or the year before, 30 tonnes of plasticised rubbish was collected after the Limassol Carnival, and I presume just dumped in landfill.
Yeah, actually, not even 2 years ago, it was 30 tons, but last year it was 43 tons of waste collected from the event, only from the streets. So imagine how much more waste has been collected from households or from other places that waste has been dumped throughout the days of Carnival.
Yeah, it's all this party string, what do they call it, and all the foam and so on. Do people realise what chemicals are in those things?
I think people, they don't have much of idea how the production and the use of the materials to create this kind of materials that we use just for one day or at least for a few days. Definitely the sprays that are using just to play around have many chemicals, as well the packaging. It's a big issue of not being able to be recycled or being reused. But yeah, it's a very big problem in Cyprus in general, as it's not only in Limassol. There's also in Aglanja the carnival, but Limassol is the most epic event.
How is the Zero Waste Alliance able to communicate all of this to people? I'll come in a minute on to making our own costumes and so on, but this very simple thing of not buying all these terribly damaging items is surely the big one.
So yeah, as Zero Waste Alliance, we are 4 organizations that we're working around zero waste. And this year's carnival, we have decided we're going to take some actions. We've been trying for the last few years to try to keep the awareness regarding carnival waste, but as well how we can find better solutions. So for this year's carnival, we have decided we're going to do a carnival costume swap, which is, for those who don't know what is a swap, it's taking your clothes and exchanging them with others. And it's a solution where it's based on reusing and also finding a way of not dumping your clothes. So we have decided to do it for carnival costume, as promoting sustainable reuse of old clothes, but as well of reducing the possibility to go and buy from companies like Shein or big fast fashion companies costumes that they're going to last only for just that day, because of the material that they're made of.
And also, let's mention children's clothes, because, of course, they won't fit them next year. So very often it is a one-off purchase, isn't it? Where is this swap going to take place?
So it's going to take place at Friends of the Earth office. It's going to be next Monday. We're going to have also the Carnival King with us, that he's going to join us and support us on promoting, making your own costume as well. So it's something that we would like to discuss with the people who are joining, but as well to have a very nice moment of exchanging clothes, but as well as costumes.
And what will you do with any clothes that are left over? Because I presume if people are going to exchange them, some of them may just leave them with you even if they don't find an alternative.
Yeah, the idea is not just dump them here at our office. The idea is to bring some clothes and swap them. So it's for them to bring them, find something they're interested, and then swap them with another person. So either they have to do this process, or the idea is for us also to support them to find a different way to reuse as well their costumes instead, rather than just leave them in a drawer for another year or two.
Okay. And apart from swapping clothes and not buying all these horrible, dangerous chemicals, what are your tips for everybody to reduce their impact on the environment during Carnival?
Definitely, one of the first things that we promote is to not use single-use plastics. It's very common that we go on that day and we prefer to use the single-use plastics provided at the event, is to take your own cup or your water bottle. As well, try to not use single-use like materials like confettis or any kind of other paper made of that it's gonna end up in the sea. As well, we promote if you go on the carnival, collect your rubbish, or if you find rubbish on the streets, or as well collect them, so that we ensure it's like a more cleaner space.
We're not very good in Cyprus at taking our rubbish home with us, are we?
Yeah, I think it's an issue that it comes with the fact that there is no so much availability of bins in the area of the carnival parade. So it's something that we promote. Take your own garbage bag, collect your trash, and if you find any trash on the streets, collect them as well and recycle them if possible. Also, something else we do is to create your own costume. Is one of the main things we're working this year is to take your old clothes and make a new costume. You don't need to go and buy materials. As friends of the Earth, as part of the alliance, we decided we wanted to do an online, let's say, competition where people that they make their own costumes, they're gonna send us the pictures, and after the carnival, we're gonna do like a very small event where we're gonna show the pictures. And we're going to have like a short discussion regarding the ideas came up for this year's carnival. So it's another way for us also to promote that and push a bit more the society to find nicer, better solutions. But as well, it reduces the stress on the single-use materials or the single-use carnival costumes. And also it's cost-free, so people, they need to reconsider buying a costume that costs like €5 and you throw it at the same day, then you just lost €5 for no reason. So we want to promote that as well.
So you can save money and you must take rubbish home with you. But having looked at the photos of the streets after the parade, I can't believe anybody, even with a huge rubbish bag, would be able to make a dent. People just chuck it where they've used it. And I find that extraordinary. How can you change that?
Definitely the municipality needs to take accountability and promote a more sustainable carnival. For example, have like more bins or have recycled bins. So separate them. It's one solution. Then ban using, for example, the sprays they're full of chemicals and the kids shouldn't use them in the parade. And it's actually a very big problem in Cyprus, the sprays. In other countries, actually, they're banned in the events.
So we need to get over that way, I guess, although we don't like being told what to do. But if it's going to be good for the environment and make so much less mess, I think a lot of people would go along with it. I think you've got a website and social media, so give us the links where people can get all these ideas from.
If you go to Zero Waste Alliance Cyprus website, how is it said, Delia.org. As well, we have Instagram and Facebook, which is ZWA Cyprus. All connected, you can find us there. We already made some posts, how to reduce your impact, also in solutions not only on Carnival, but also in other factors. And also we have the posts on our social media about the events and activities we do as an alliance.
Well, I wish you the best of luck. Fingers crossed it has some sort of an impact. Olivia Skoradi from Zero Waste Alliance Cyprus, Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.